Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's BDF44 coming at you with another video. So, as promised, I'm going to give you just about every team, if not every team's roster, and kind of give them a little breakdown of what I perceive the team to be about, just my little opinion. And, I'm going to, of course, give you a disclaimer and say, I don't know these teams like that, especially this particular team, the Memphis Grizzlies. I didn't watch a whole lot of at all, but follow the sport as much as I can, and I do know of most of the players. Did a little homework here and there, so I'll give you what I got, and this is for Memphis. All right, first player we're going to talk about here is Ja Morant. Ja Morant was a player taken second in overall in the draft. I believe that was the year before last. I want to say that was 19. I think that was 19. But Ja Morant has come along very, very strong. Superior athlete, superior shooting ability, hyper confidence, under control. Just a young superstar prospect coming into his own. Everybody knows the ceiling for Ja Morant is the moon, and we all understand that he's already the face of the Memphis Grizzlies, and rightfully so. He's a kid with a lot of poise, good character, good basketball skills, and an all-around player on both ends of the floor with a lot of athleticism and a lot of basketball smarts. So, to be honest with you, there's literally nothing bad to say about Ja Morant. He's the type of player you want to start your franchise around at the guard position. He's the type of guy you want leading your troops, and he's the perfect person for this gig. So that's what I think of Ja Morant. Second guy I got on the list here is Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr.'s father played for the San Antonio Spurs back in the day. I think he won a championship with them or two. Wasn't like his son. Jaren Jackson Sr. was more of a stretch three. He was a 3-point 3-and-D guy, I guess you could say. Played a little forward here and there, but mostly a small forward. His son is more like a power forward center combination, almost a 7-footer, shot blocker, could stretch the floor, a lot of athleticism in a big body. The thing about Jaren Jackson is he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Injury here and there keeps him out for a while, so it's kind of a slippery slope as it pertains to trying to judge what Jaren Jackson has done thus far, because some people think of him as somebody who's heading toward the bust side of the game. I personally don't even think along those lines as it pertains to this player. It's too early. He's got too many skills. His size and his skill set dictates how I view him more so than what he's done in this league thus far. So with a healthy season, I'm sure Jaren Jackson Jr. Is the type of guy who's going to be able to block a shot a game, rebound a lot, score a lot, stretch the floor plenty, and just overall be a good rebounder for this team. So I still think the upside for this guy is tremendous. I think he's a solid number 2. I feel good about him going forward. The timeline is perfect for the rest of the roster. For him to come into his own and take his time in doing so. That's the good thing about this Memphis Grizzlies team. They have a bunch of young players that are all along the same age. So at this point, it's not about necessarily trying to hurry up and develop them, but also more so about bringing them all together so that they can grow together and do it that way. So I love the timeline of this roster, and Jaren Jackson is a big part of it. Okay, the next name we're going to talk about is Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks is a guy who, if you've heard me talk about Dillon Brooks, you know that I always reference the fact that he was almost traded to Phoenix. Phoenix thought they had him when they actually had another guy with the same name, Brooks, with a lot less value attached to that person's name. So they would have had to ante up a great deal more to try to pry Dillon Brooks away from Memphis. But unfortunately, even then, he wasn't up for sale. Memphis very much believes in this player. He's a shooting guard, small forward combination. Can play a little point guard too. Good handles, finishes at the basket well, shoots the ball well, plays defense. Just your quintessential dual threat player who can do a lot of things for you, who's ascending into his own. Somebody you can definitely see comfortably scoring 20 points a game at some point. He's on his way there now. This is a very, very, very good player on both sides of the floor. Memphis Grizzlies feel great about him. Next name I see on this list is Brandon Clark. And Brandon Clark is a player who is a big body, power forward body, shooting guard skills, shooting guard handles. This dude has very, very, very good handles for his size. Quick foot. Thing about him is, like Jaren Jackson Jr., hasn't really stepped into his own just yet. Hasn't really shown us why he is the Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades type of player that we ultimately believe he's going to turn into. Kind of just inconsistent. That kind of goes along with the role that he's been given as well. Inconsistent. I think we've seen enough from Brandon Clark to know the upside is there. We like the environment he's in. It's just about him stepping into his own and playing better. Simple as that. We believe Brandon Clark can play better with the opportunity ahead. I believe he should be able to do so, but it's a lot of players on this team. So if he continues to struggle or disappoint, he will get buried behind this bench. There are a lot of guys here at that position particularly. So while I like Brandon Clark, multi-positional player, he pretty much doesn't have a position. He can play them all. But it's kind of hard to put him down there when he's inconsistent with big minutes sometimes. So it's just about, rounding in the form for him, getting his conditioning where it needs to be, continuing to work on his game, continuing to do what the coach asks him to do. And I think he'll be all right. But I'd be lying, and I've been thinking about this for a little bit. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think a change of scenery would be good for that particular player. Brandon Clark is a player I'm concerned that if he continues to struggle, he's going to find himself getting guys buried and put in front of him, and he's going to get buried behind the bench over time. We've seen that happen with several types of players. A couple of guys I could think of that have gone through that, particularly guys that have played in like the Miami Heat and certain teams like that. It's like, look, we drafted you. Year 1, not so great. Year 2, not so great. Year 3, by the time year 4 comes around, we've drafted a guy in front of you. We picked up a free agent in front of you. We got another guy who plays multiple positions, so we can kind of use him instead of you. So it's becoming that type of situation for Brandon Clark. I think we're stepping into a space where if he doesn't have a good year and he continues to get buried behind players who they believe in more so than him, I think it would be a great idea for them to try to retain his value and get him to a situation where he can spread his wings a bit more. I just think the roster's a bit clogged for him and his what he needs in terms of rope to be able to make mistakes and get better. He just doesn't have a long enough rope, in my opinion, on this roster to keep a starting spot or a legitimate role of consistency. So a lot of that, I'd imagine, is on him. A lot of that's on the organization and coaching staff to develop the player and make sure he has a role. But it's getting to a point where I'm like, all right, I'm concerned about his upside at this point. So that's what I got for Brandon Clark. The next name I want to mention on here is a guy by the name of Steven Adams. They just picked up from the New Orleans Pelicans. They made a trade, sent Jonas Valanciunas, and that was it. I think they sent Jonas Valanciunas New Orleans way. They got back Bledsoe. Bledsoe ended up a Clipper somehow. But we do have Steven Adams retained on this team as their starting center. A guy who's fantastic. Younger than most people think. He's only like 27 years of age. Rebounds the ball extremely well. Very, very smart. Extremely strong. Extremely tough. And he's somebody who's going to always bring good energy to your roster. Always somebody that people are happy to speak of and be around, from what I understand. Fantastic free throw shooter. Again, he's fantastic on the board. Sets screens well. This is somebody that I like defensively. This is somebody who has more skills than people see and think. He's kind of been rendered to certain roles, being that he's played with Russell Westbrook and people like that. It's kind of limited him. But he's a very good player who can do a lot of things for you. Underrated playmaker. As I said, good from the line. And those type of things are important when you're mentioning centers. And he's somebody who's actually working on his three-point shot. Albeit somebody you do not want shooting threes in theory, but he's definitely somebody who over time, like a Dwight Howard, like some of the other players, Rondo, getting himself to a point where he feels comfortable letting that shot go. And as he continues to develop in that way, he'll just become that much more of a dangerous player. So I like Steven Adams a lot with this team. He fits the grit and grind mold. He's of that mentality, hard work and things of that nature. We know that's what Memphis is about. Next person we'll talk about is also a center on this roster. Xavier Tillman, a rookie last year, came along very, very strong. Kind of wonder what kind of role he's going to have because of the presence of Steven Adams, because of the presence of Jaren Jackson Jr., but he's definitely a guy who has a whole lot of game, a whole lot of upside. Power forward in this league. I'm not really sure if he can stretch the floor, not certain, but I do know that he was putting up big boards and giving you real good scoring numbers, and that's a good start for a player who just came into this league. He had a very good rookie season and a collection of players that all again are on the same timeline. There's no rush for him to get better right away. He can just continue to mold into the player that he's going to be. And let me tell you, he's a very active player. I have more to learn about him than to say, but I do know that this dude can play. I know that much. All right, next name up, Kyle Anderson. And Kyle Anderson is coming along very strong. Kyle Anderson, if I'm not mistaken, he started his career with the San Antonio Spurs. They call him slow-mo because he plays in slow motion. but don't let the smooth taste fool you. He's very effective. He's an efficient player. He's highly capable of making others better by passing the rock. He rebounds well, and slowly but surely, he is becoming a player that you have to deal with every single night. His scoring ability is evident, even though he moves in slow motion. It's one of those situations where you know for a fact that you can know what's coming. This question is, can you stop it? Now, he does have some limitations here and there, but he's starting to round into form in terms of being somebody who's starting to shave off those weaknesses and starting to accentuate those strengths. And with this Memphis Grizzlies roster, he's fit right in. He helps facilitate the basketball. He helps scoring the basketball. He rebounds. He's really a jack of all trade, a player that you could put in there for 30 minutes a night, and he will give you big numbers as a role player. So I'm a huge supporter of Kyle Anderson on this roster. I think he fits. I think they should keep him. All that good stuff. He's just a good glue guy for this roster. He reminds me of what Nicholas Batum does for the Clippers, or more so, a better way to describe it is what Nicholas Batum used to do for the Blazers. I think that's a better way to describe what I see as Kyle Anderson. Not really that kind of way on the defensive end, but he makes up for it in comparison with what he does offensively, passing the rock and things of that nature. So I'm a big supporter of him. D'Anthony Melton is a guy that doesn't get enough playing time on this roster, but has shown that he can really go. There's a guy that comes to mind. I can't think of his name, but he plays for the Philadelphia 76ers. Also has a similar name, Milton, Shake Milton. Those two guys are comparable in my mind. They kind of came along around the same times, got opportunities with their respective teams at the same time, and I was able to have both of those guys on my fantasy basketball team at the same time. And let me tell you, Melton, both of them can go. I'm looking forward to seeing what D'Anthony Melton particularly can do, of course, because he's playing for the Memphis Grizzlies, of whom we're talking about. And unfortunately, it's just one of those situations where they have so many guards. Obviously, they got Ja Morant. You can't move in front of him. So even if you're the second coming of the great point guard, you're just not going to get that opportunity on this team. But with the opportunity he's been given, albeit a logjam, he has shown that he can play, and he can play big. So he's yet another one of those guys that I often reference how the NBA needs to extend and get more teams into this league. He's a prime example of why it's necessary to do so, because you have guys like him who, if given bigger roles, would just be able to show that they can do a lot more than they've been given with the team that they're with. I could take one player from every team and put them on an expansion team and give them a better role than they're on, because that's just how logjam the NBA is as a whole right now. So he is a good example of that. D'Anthony Melton, a guy who can do more than what he's asked to do. But because he's on this team, they have depth at that point guard position. Because he can do the things that he does, they can hold on to, not necessarily needing to overplay Ja Morant, make him play through injury, things of that nature. They have plenty of point guards and guards that can help with that. So he's one of them. The next one I'm going to mention is also a guy that can do that. Tyus Jones. He had a nice breakout last year. Let me tell you, Tyus Jones, yet another example of the exact same thing. A guy who needs to be in a bigger role because he's ready to do more than what he's asked to do for the team he's playing for. The Las Vegas trees, I don't know, you come up with a name and you give them a team, because this is the type of situation. Get Tyus Jones in a situation where he can be the main backup point guard or a starting point guard in this league. His numbers dictate that it's time to give him that opportunity. He's just like a guy like TJ McConnell, kind of stuck in no man's land in terms of the role that he's in, based on the size, based on just being typecast as a guy who can't really play like that. Came along, Tyus Jones did, with the Minnesota Timberwolves. They had a bunch of point guards on top of that. There was no way for him to step up into the role that he's supposed to and become the player that ultimately he can be. And just get typecast, like I said. And, he's somebody who, in spite of that, found his way into Memphis, and Memphis has done a fantastic job developing him. And when Ja Morant went down, this dude stepped in and was practically putting up all-star numbers. He has a lot of pop, a lot of confidence, should not be buried in the back of nobody's bench at this stage in his development, not at all. So Tyus Jones is one of those guys. He just needs more of an opportunity. That is it. Jarrett Culver is on this team now. Jarrett Culver is with the Minnesota Timberwolves also. Somebody who was also over there with him for a time. And Jarrett Culver is more of a defensive player, guy that you have to wait on in terms of his development, because he doesn't have a lot of natural translatable NBA skills. What he has is a feel for the game. Defensive intangibles, a 50-50 ball kind of guy, dirty dive for the ball kind of energy, play defense, get steals, stuff like that. He's not particularly a smooth shooter, not particularly a great finisher. You understand, like, translatable skills in the NBA? So that means that you're going to have to wait on a guy like this. That's what it means. But when he becomes what he's supposed to become, he can give you a lot of anything, maybe become a Patrick Beverly type of productive player, defensively, that kind of thing. Just be everywhere, do a little everything, hit some threes here and there, get to the line, that kind of stuff. His upside's really high. You know, the Minnesota Timberwolves drafted him, I think, in the lottery like maybe 5 years ago. And he, just like in Minnesota with most situations, just didn't develop properly out there. You know, they needed more traditional type of players. And as I said, you just gotta let this guy develop. It takes time for players like this to come into their own, master what it is that they do, and then implement it into the game. It takes some time. Guys like this usually take, in my opinion, about 6 or 7 years, as opposed to guys who have regular translatable skills, shooting and rebounding and all that stuff that translates to the NBA easily out of college. Usually takes about 4 years. But guys like this who are specialty players, or guys who don't do the stuff that makes basketball smooth, but does the things that disrupt the guys that make basketball smooth, you got to wait on them. And he's one of those guys. He's a disruptor. So give him some time. You'll wake up one day, 2026, and he'll be a valuable role player on somebody's team. But for now, he's still kind of stuck behind a lot of guys on this team that are just going to get a lot more minutes than him. And that's the concern about Jarrett Culver on this roster. They're just overrun with shooting guards that they really, really like, and multi-positional players that they don't necessarily need Jarrett Culver to play at all. Good thing about Jarrett Culver is he too can play about 2 or 3 positions, but it's just like, I mean, I could play Kyle Anderson at the 1. I could play Brandon Clark at 2. There's a lot of different interchangeable pieces that make it so that a guy like Jarrett Culver is just probably not going to get the most playing time unless he outplays some people on this roster that I don't see coming. So that's an important part of the situation. And then, of course, they got some guys on this roster, like let's say Juancho Hernan Gomez. He just came in. He's going to help boost their center position. I don't know a whole lot about Juancho as it pertains to the individual player. He has a brother, also another Hernan Gomez in this league. I believe he's with Minnesota, but it's hard to keep up, to be completely honest with you. I got to go find out which Hernan Gomez this is and tell you what his game is. But they got one of the Hernan Gomez. He is in Memphis right now, and he's going to help them with their center position for sure. So a couple of guys that they have on here. There's a name I wrote down, but I think he might have been traded to Utah, Grayson Allen. So just kind of leave him as a question mark for me. He may be with Memphis. He may be with Utah. I can't seem to keep up. He was traded from one of those teams to the nether. I just don't know which. But my gut tells me he's not on this team. I think he's on Utah. So just hold out on that. But yeah, who else do we have on this list besides the rookie that I want to get into? Saudi Aldama was a player that they drafted in the 30th pick in the first round, into the first round. Not familiar with the player, but he's a new guy that they're going to bring along, so welcome him. Desmond Bane is on this roster. I've heard his name a couple times, but I have never seen him play. John Conchar is another guy, not familiar with. Yavis Pons, not familiar. And Daniel Oturu was a guy they got from the Clippers. In the trade that they did for Eric Bledsoe, when the Clippers kind of gave away everything for Eric Bledsoe and it was ill-advised. Well, yeah, Daniel Oturu, a center, power forward dude, back to the basket kind of presence, rebounding presence, double-double guy. Definitely not somebody the Clippers should have been giving up on just at a whim to pick up a struggling point guard with a bad contract. Daniel Oturu may not do anything at all, but what I've seen from him in Summer League is that he's a very productive inside the paint kind of guy. Definitely a big body that you could throw 6 fouls at somebody else, pull down some boards, be disruptive at the very least. At the very least, rebounding presence. So I like Daniel Oturu. If he, as a rookie in the back of the bench, somebody with a big body who's been very productive on basketball floors. So I know that much about him. All right. So as I love to do, I do a little homework on the rookies that they pick up. And the Memphis Grizzlies got a high-valued rookie. They picked up Zaire Williams with the 10th pick in the draft. Now, this guy is LeBron James's nephew. Now, I don't know if it's by blood or not, but it was listed as his nephew, so take that for what it's worth. He's from out here, Lancaster, California. Went to Stanford, shooting guard, 6'8", shooting guard with 6'10" wingspan. That tells me multi-positional. He's probably comfortable playing the 2. He's going to fill out to be a 3, play 4 in small ball lineups. 6'10 wingspan, yeah, that's something to mess with. He has a good off the dribble shooting. Pick up this dribble and shoot the ball. He's very good at those situations. Catch and shoot, not certain, but he's definitely good with the ball in his hands. Defensive presence, good handle, mid-range shooter, three-point shooter, very, very, very balanced 3-level scorer from what I understand. With his long arms, he can get some in the defensive passing lanes. He has some playmaking ability, has a whole lot of jump, he's very athletic, very, very mobile in the air. He is a bit of a reach because he had a bad season with Stanford, but from what I understand, they had some very, very unique circumstances on top of COVID. So even though I didn't find out the context from which those circumstances were, I understood those circumstances to be excusable for the type of season he had in his one-and-done year with Stanford. So he's a youngster, has not developed just yet, but he's a guy from Sierra Canyon. He played with LeBron's son, it's obviously his cousin, and he comes from good stock. This is somebody who for a fact, when he fills out his body, he's going to be a small forward in this league that can do a lot of things for you. Like I said, he was taken 10th in the draft, even though it was a reach because of the bad year that he had. Some would say he should have went in the back of the first round, mid first round, something like that. So he went 10th, and he fits well. On the scouting videos that I saw, Memphis is one of the main places they thought he would fit well. He's going to be the guy between Jaren Jackson Jr., Brooks, and Ja Morant. Eventually, they expect him to come into his own, become a starter. And when you draft a guy that high, you're hopeful that he can become an all-star someday. So from what I saw, it was still limited stuff. I didn't do as much homework on him as I need to, but I saw enough highlights on him to know that he's able to use his length, jumping into passing lanes, things of that nature. He's a very, very crafty defensive player, and with that wingspan, he's going to be able to get steals and stuff like that, rebounds, stuff like that. So, they're hopeful that he turns into like a Tracy, Kobe type of prototype. That's what they were shooting for when they drafted this player. They wanted to be your quintessential fantastic shooting guard, your Ray Allen, your Jaylen Brown, your Anthony Edwards, these type of guys. They're hopeful that he can be some version of that. And from what I saw, I have no reason to believe he can't. The skills look like they're there. The height and the length is there. The opportunity with this team it's there. But like I said, they got a bunch of players, so he's going to be battling. Guys like Brandon Clark, it's going to be between him and Brandon Clark. Who can get it? You know what I mean? So it's that kind of thing. But Zair's going to have a leg up because he's the guy they just drafted. He's the guy with the most upside right now between the two of them. And I think ultimately I'll be pretty optimistic that this dude's going to have a hell of a rookie season. The opportunity will be there. Playing with Ja Morant, they're going to be getting out in the open court, being defensive, being smart. This is a good team. They have a coach by the name of Taylor Jenkins that they hired back in 2019. I am going to not lie to anybody and say I've never heard of Taylor Jenkins until today. So the fact that he's been the coach for 2 years, that's a good thing because that means he hasn't made any type of noise in a negative way to where he would be a highlight. What we've talked about in regards to the Memphis Grizzlies the last 2 years is how well they have put their roster together, how well their scouts are doing in putting players on this roster, and most importantly, how well those players have played under this coach. So even though I didn't know who he was, the fact that I didn't know who he was is a good thing because that means ain't nobody saying nothing bad about him, and it does mean that what I've been hearing about the team is a reflection on how well he's been doing in developing those players. So I don't need to know too much. Taylor Jenkins is doing a good job because ain't nothing to say. So, with that being said, that's what I got from Memphis, man. I think they're a pretty good team. I really do. This is a team that I thought in some ways could make the playoffs this year, can make the playoffs this year. They do have a couple players on this roster, as I've mentioned, that I think need to play better in order for them to ascend into the type of team that I ultimately believe that they are. But the Western Conference is weaker this year, and there's an opportunity for a team like Memphis, with all of the young players that they have taken taking a step forward with their careers. It should be a lot of upside, a lot of reason to be happy about this team. If you notice about Memphis, they don't have any old guys on this team, no veterans. We talked a lot about Bledsoe coming in, Rondo coming in, Beverly coming in, and a lot of people were talking about how they're going to be playing on this team, and let's see what kind of role those 3 players have. And I told everybody, and if you go back and watch some of my videos when all that was going on, I told everybody as soon as those trades happened that none of those players would play for Memphis. Why? Because Memphis is very much set on drafting players that they believe in and that they've scouted, and then putting those players in their system and giving them roles specific to what it is that they want them to do. They're not in the business of building fluff. They're not in the business of throwing $300 million at 3 players and saying, let's go get it. That's not how Memphis rolls. They're trying to build through the draft, and they are putting a lot of equity and a lot of emphasis on their own homegrown players, and that is what it's all about in Memphis. So yeah, there's no room for a Bledsoe. There's no room for a Beverly. There's no room for a Rondo. We're not taking on no dead weight if it's Memphis Grizzlies. That's how they roll. Bring me nothing but homegrown guys that we can work with and that we can keep in our system. It's hard enough for small market organizations to attract free agents. The best way to do it is to ignore free agency entirely, build your own thing, make it as attractive as possible so that someone from the outside will want to be a part of it. That's the best way to build. Golden State did it that way, and it's worked for them, and I think Memphis is one on its way to making it work for them. Grit and grind, they have a strong history thus far, fantastic players in their recent past, Zebo, Marc Gasol, you name it. This is a good organization, but they have yet to win a championship, and it's one of those situations where they're continuing to pile on talent. A guy like Zaire Williams turns into one of the best shooting guards. You got Ja Morant, you got Jaren Jackson. That's a good 3-headed monster of balance from which to build their team. So I like what they have here. I didn't check their numbers to see all the contracts that they have and stuff like that. But everybody on this team holds value. Everybody on this team has upside. Everybody on this team should be able to fit in most places in this league. So I like this team. In every way, shape, and form. I think they can be probably the 7th seed. I got them making the playoffs. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, some of their players have to play better. You're going to need your Brandon Clarks to play better. You need your Xavier Tillmans to find roles. You need Jarrett Culver to find roles. But if the coach, Taylor, can get all these guys in their positions properly and keep them healthy, continue to use guys like Tyus Jones, don't let him take steps backwards in his production, because that's so very important. Being that they have some guys that are on the back of their bench taking steps forwards, and some guys that they have been playing who haven't stepped forward necessarily. So it's going to be important to make sure those rotations are tight. But that's what I got, man. It's an exciting year in Memphis, man. I don't think this is just a wash season. I think they got something to play for. I don't think they're going to win a championship or nothing, but the path to overachieve is there. So that's what I got, man. My name is BDL44. Thank you all for watching.